The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640 Toronto Radio.
10, 9, 8, 7,
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman. AM 640. Toronto Radio.
Hi, I'm the Spaceman. This is A View from Space. I want to welcome you in if you're listening to AM 640, Toronto Radio, driving around town, or if you're listening at work, or if you're dialed into channel 865 on Star Choice. I welcome you in also. And if you're sitting in the premier seat for A View from Space on AM 640, logged on to 640torontoradio.com, picking up the live audio streaming, I welcome you in. And wherever you are in the world, I welcome you in. Well, it started last year in Australia as they held the first Earth Hour. And the Illuminati said to themselves, this is a perfect idea. Let's run this one around the world to see how much work we need to do. Let me qualify that. Let me just tell you what I exactly mean by that. There is a concerted effort underway to convince people. It's a battle for the mind about climate change and about getting off fossil fuels, you already know this, to the solar panels and let the sun and the wind run our economy, which will, of course, as everyone knows, be a absolute, total disaster. But that's exactly what the Illuminati have planned for the world, and that's exactly what they want. A disastrous economy in each and every country in the world, a global depression leading to the Third World War. And climate change has a whole lot to do with it. So think of it like this. When you change, I like to explain it this way, when you change your oil in the car, you check the dipstick to see how much there is, right? Well, this is exactly what Earth Hour is all about. A quite ingenious little invention, actually, because it tells them all they have to do is get up in their little airplane, fly around the city at night, and see just how many lights are actually turned off. And what it's called is this. It's a dipstick for them to find out how much work they have to do to convince people of climate change and to get on board with their solution, which will lead to the global depression. And it's this. It's simply called, let's just see who hears us right now. Blink your lights if you hear me. It's exactly what Earth Hour is all about. Just to see how many people are on side and have been convinced. And a show for the rest that haven't been convinced to show crowds of people out supporting it. When they're actually not supporting climate change at all, they're going to a music show like we had here tonight in front of City Hall here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, with Nelly Furtado performing. They came out to see free concert. That's why they got the incredible crowd they got. And, of course, the corporations were the only ones that dimmed the lights, because I work in the center of this metropolis, and I made my way into it on Earth Hour and had a look at all the lights. And I mean, I looked at all the lights. They were all on, except for the corporate sponsors, who actually own the skyline, of course. And so that will be the shot that's shot around the world. Here's Toronto in the dark. By the way, your Google page, you're listening to me on 640toronto.com, you already know this. The Google page is absolutely black. It's dark. It's gone dark. So they turned the skyline off in Toronto, basically. World, I want to tell the world that now. I came up here and all the other lights were on. There wasn't really anyone that did the candlelight thing. There were no, well, it was probably the odd little family who's got a little 5-year-old or 6-year-old that was brainwashed to death for the last 3 weeks at school, waiting for this event so that they could pass the message on to their parents. Save our world. And that's about all. There was one cute little girl that was interviewed on television here in Toronto earlier, and she was asked why everybody was turning their lights out tonight. She was just very, very, very young, probably about 4 or 5. And she said, so the polar bears won't die. And they're cute. We're turning our lights out so the polar bears won't die. There's a disconnect. I don't quite get that, but it's from a 4-year-old or 5-year-old and who's already obviously been brainwashed, because that's really who they're after. They're after the youth, not the older person, not you if you're listening over 40, because you've already made up your mind. And you're not about to change with all the scientific gobbledygook. And David Suzuki made a appearance just before Hockey Night in Canada, which is on our national government channel, if you're listening somewhere else in the world. And it's really the only high-rated show that this old, archaic national television network has going. It shows a hockey game at night, and of course that's our greatest sport in this country. David Suzuki came on and said that it was okay to watch the game with the lights on at the ACC. And so the host of the program, after David Suzuki's little pre-recorded piece was played, says, if David Suzuki says it's okay for us to watch the Leafs and the Habs, well, then we can watch it. Well, thanks, Mr. Suzuki. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I want to thank you for allowing that to happen tonight. All right, AM 640, Toronto Radio, Spaceman, and A View from Space. At the concert, of course, the dignitaries at the little town hall that we have here, we have a square where everyone gathered for this Furtado show. Just before I go to break, I want you to know this. It's all about religion. Climate change. It's all about the New World Order's new religion, the Luciferian indoctrination that's coming. The Earth has a goddess named Gaia as her spirit, as they believe that the Earth is a living, breathing organism, and they've given it a name, and she is a goddess called Gaia. G-A-I-A. Google it, please, if you're in front of your Mac or your PC right now, picking up the live audio streaming on 640toronto.com, and see exactly what Gaia is, because I've done shows on this before. I only have so much time tonight. But Gaia is, of course, a female. She's the female personification of the Earth. Well, tonight, Gaia was personified by Nelly Furtado. Nelly Furtado is the first person to do Earth Hour, because Earth Hour will come next year, because they want to stick the dipstick in again and see how it's going. And by the way, if you're not performing well, you may have some rolling blackouts. You may have some problems buying gas with gas shortages. Anything to do with energy, they will kind of push you a little bit more until you sort of, shall we say, see the light. Okay? And with Earth Hour, they can fly over the cities that they've performed this magic spell on, this black magic spell on, and see who actually is on board and who is not, and where they have to do work and where they don't have to do as much convincing. So that's what Earth Hour was tonight. It was a dipstick to see how much work the Illuminati have to do to convince you to come over to their side. When I come back, the intro to Nelly Furtado, very interesting. Back in a moment on AM 640, Toronto Radio. This is A View from Space. I'm Space, just getting started.
Ancient mystery religions, numerology, the Holy Grail decoded, and he goes deeper than a black hole in today's headlines. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman. AM 640, Toronto Radio.
Spaceman, AM 640, Toronto Radio, and A View from Space. I was just telling you about the Earth Hour, that the concert that was at our city center, in front of our city hall here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Here's how the rock star or pop star was introduced by a woman, by another woman. Because you see, after all, Gaia, the Earth goddess, is a woman. This is all about goddess worship. And Nelly Furtado has been picked for this year to be the very first person who will personify Gaia, the Earth goddess. So the politician or whoever it was a woman who introduced her. And she broke off her speech about how wonderful it is that people are turning out their lights. And she said this, not, here she is. She said it exactly like this. Notice the inflection. She's waiting for you. She can't wait to meet you. Here's Nelly Furtado. And you know that she was putting the accent on she because in her heart of hearts, the person who did that intro and behind part of this movement knows it's about Gaia, the Earth goddess. The Illuminati are intent on setting up a one-world government to enslave man and to have the elite bloodline families be our masters. This is nothing new to you if you've listened to this show before. The highest, purest of these bloodlines will be the one who will arise as the Antichrist, who will possess knowledge of the occult, the dark side. And look how they're oogling over how dark everything was on Earth Hour. Because you see, Earth Hour, if you actually understand what happened globally, Earth Hour actually followed the sun around the world. As it was setting, Earth Hour was beginning in every single one of the countries that was involved. The dark side is what they're really interested in. Come over to the dark side. Look at the movie Star Wars, where Darth Vader, the evil one, actually is the hero's father, bringing him over to the dark side. That is what it's all about to the Illuminati today. A slow education, a slow indoctrination to the Luciferian beliefs. As Daniel chapter 8, the sun worshipper's number, line number 23, a very important number to the Illuminati, as it affects every single person's life tremendously, the number 23. So Daniel 8:23 states, "He will possess great power through his understanding and practice of the occult arts," or witchcraft. I quote Daniel 8:23. "And in the latter time of the kingdom, when the transgressors are come to full, and a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand." More of that coming up on AM 640 Toronto Radio on A View from Space. I'll explain it a little further. His policy also shall cause the craft to prosper in his hand. Very interesting. As always, for their events, the Illuminati stage events which have global implications. They must have global implications, such as the global war on terrorism, or one I'm talking about tonight, climate change. Because you see, a global war affects everyone. Climate change affects everyone. Travel on aircraft, moving germs from one country to another. Borders become global. Anything global is going to be pushed by them. The reason for global is because they want to set up a global government, a one world government. So it must affect us all. We must all feel the need for a global government when all is said and done. It's really quite simple to comprehend. They just confuse things because they lie so much at what is going on. They will not tell you the truth. You can see it from the politicians who are put out there in front of you to have to stumble over their own words to try and lie through their teeth to explain to you something that they did for their elite rich bosses and not for you, the person who voted them in. Earth Hour is an international event that asks households and businesses to turn off their lights and non-essential electrical appliances for 1 hour on the evening of the 29th of March, 8 o'clock local time, until 9 to promote electricity conservation. And doing that, they say, lower carbon emissions. It's called greenhouse gases, or for short, GHG. They like GHT. You know why I like GHT? Because it's palindromic. The Illuminati love palindromic words or phrases. A palindrome is a word, a phrase, a number, or other sequence of units that has the property of reading the same in either direction. Read it forward, it's the same when you read it backwards, like GHG. Same backwards as it is forwards. Same as it is above, so it is below. Backwards and forwards. It's palindromic. The Illuminati love them. In other words, whichever way you go, you'll arrive at the same destination. Sound like exactly where the Illuminati intend to take us? No matter where your culture is coming from, it'll end up being the same as everyone else's. No matter what religion you hold, it'll end up being Luciferian, theirs. It's promoted by the Worldwide Fund for Nature Australia, the WWF, an environmental lobby group, and the Sydney Morning Herald newspaper. Like I said, the first Earth Hour was held last year on the 31st of March, 2007. But that won't do because March 31 has no numerology in it. So it had to be moved to the 29th. When the Illuminati got a hold of it and said, this is a great idea, we're going worldwide because it's a perfect dipstick to see which places need a little more nudging. So if you didn't perform well on Earth Hour with a lot of lights out, like I said, possible rolling blackouts, brownouts, maybe even power outages for a certain amount of time until the next Earth Hour comes around, and you will see how important it really is to you. Because you still don't react, they push it a little harder. Spaceman, back with more in a moment on AM 640, Toronto Radio, and A View from Space.
You're listening to A View from Space, exclusively on AM 640, Toronto Radio. The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640 Toronto Radio. You're listening to A View from Space with the Spaceman exercising the right to free speech while he still can. AM 640 Toronto Radio.
I'm the guy that calls Space on AM 640 Toronto Radio and A View from Space. Tonight, Earth Hour. Yeah, I'll find a way somehow to do 3 hours on 1 hour. You can email me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. D, I'll just call him D, writes, I made it a point of running all of my 10 computers, imaging and backup, cranking my stereo, and turning on all my lights and TVs. Signed D. I don't know how many people that are hearing the sound of my voice right now that think or thought like that as 8 o'clock approached. But I've got a feeling there are very many people, because it's only the corporate world that has gotten behind this, and they show their power by just closing down our skyline. But the rest of us inhabitants went on with our lives as usual. Just another night with the same lights burning as last week, as last night. It's being promoted by the World Wild Fund for Nature, which is the old World Wildlife Fund, the old WWF. That, by the way, one of its founders, if you're not aware, is Sir Julian Sorrel Huxley. He came, of course, from the very distinguished British Huxley family, who are just an incredibly wealthy and very well-positioned family. This is the brother of writer Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World. This is the half-brother of the fellow biologist and Nobel laureate Andrew Huxley. His father was writer and editor Leonard Huxley, and his paternal grandfather was Thomas Henry Huxley, a friend and a huge supporter of Charles Darwin, who, of course, gave us the theory of evolution, starting at around Australia, I guess, and around the Galapagos, which is where Earth Hour started. And isn't it appropriate that it would start there? At the very area where the true God was attacked with this theory of evolution, Charles Darwin's theory, which actually fits quite well with the Illuminati's plans, because it's called this: the fittest in the jungle survive. And that's what basically the Darwin theory of evolution is. The fittest survive. The richest survive the stock market. It's just a quick analogy here for you of what's been going on there lately. And you have to be one of them to survive. And I said Sir Julian Huxley, okay? He was knighted in 1958. And we can see why. What a wonderful family to the Illuminati they have been. Such great strides, such huge, huge people that they can point to and say, there are the brains of our civilization. So let's get into the numbers, because the numbers have to be there, or this is not an Illuminati event, right? It has to be. If it's involving the Illuminati, it has to have numerology, and it has to have astrology. Here's the numerology built into this occult event. Firstly, just look at the logo itself. The number 60. Drop the 0, you're left with 6, the number of man. And it's supposedly, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, to be 60 minutes. They could have put 1 to be 1 hour, but 1's no good. 6 is the number of man, and it's man who is the target. So it has to have that. So it's right there in the logo. 6, the number of man. Why is 6 the number of man? Because in the King James Version of the Bible, which they are going to follow to the T, man was made on the 6th day. The sun worshipper's number is 8. The analemma of the sun, the sun's path in a year is an 8 lying on its side. March 29th, Earth Day, is the 88th day of the year. Only they screwed up here because it's a leap year, and today is actually the 89th day of the year. But on non-leap years, March 29th is always going to be the 88, the sun worshipper's number. There are 277 days left in the year. 2 plus 7 plus 7 is 16, a 88. The hour chosen as the start of Earth hour around the world is 8. There are 8 countries participating. Canada, who had the biggest response, by the way, so I expect no rolling blackouts or brownouts or power outages. The United States, Ireland, one of the only 2 countries in the European Union, the Philippines, Denmark, New Zealand, Australia, and Israel. Denmark being the other EU country. Only 2 EU countries. 8 countries in all. 26 major cities signed up. 6 and 2, let me see. Another 8. It takes 8 minutes for the sun's rays to reach Earth. Did you know that? Then the date itself. March 29. March the 3rd month. 2 and 9 is 11. It's 3/11. That was the date of the Madrid bombings. The European Union's 9/11 was 3/11. And it has to have an 11 in it because it is directly aiding the rise of the Antichrist and the one world government. Therefore, 11 is denoted. The master number 3 for March is, of course, the unholy Trinity. There's a pattern of sunspots and flares known as the butterfly pattern, wherein over the sun's 11-year cycle, sunspots start at higher latitudes on the sun's surface and progressively confined to more equatorial bands near the equator of the sun, the center of the sun. The mechanism behind this is unknown, but they call these incredible actions on the sun corona mass ejections, and are driven by the energy release from the sun's magnetic field. It's believed that the sun's magnetic field gets twisted and bunched up, and when it gets too twisted, sometimes it forces itself free. This releases energy that ejects material off the sun. This event is called a corona mass ejection, and they occur at 11 and 22-year intervals. There's a maximum 11-year period, and there's a minimal 11-year period. If you've been listening to AM 640, Toronto Radio, and A View from Space, past shows, not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, when gold hit 1,000, I did the gold show, where it showed you that the actual gold, which represents the sun, it's the color of the sun, gold, yellow, that it actually traces gold's movements through the 11 and 22-year cycle of the sun. So whatever happens on the sun happens to gold. A very interesting show about the maximum 11-year period and the minimum 11-year period of action on the sun. We have just went through what they call sun cycle 23, and of course 23 is that number again for the Illuminati that they believe 23 affects everyone's life quite drastically. Sun cycle 23 in its maximum included September 11th, 2001. Now, we have just entered sun cycle 24, and they've been waiting for it to begin again on this, a new 11-year cycle of 22 years of maximum and minimum, maximum and minimum. The number of sunspots will vary from year to year, and you'll find that a solar number, a solar maximum, the number for that year will be over 100, and during a solar minimum, you'll find maybe just like, say, 15. And in sun cycle 23, the last solar maximum, there were 158 sunspots. I believe the maximum cycle on this latest one that started January 4th, sun cycle 24, which is the number of man, 6, is going to be pretty devastating. That's only my opinion. But already, sun cycle 24 has started with little events like a major brokerage house on Wall Street going bankrupt, oil hitting $110 a barrel, gold at over $1,000 a troy ounce, an assassination in Pakistan, which actually happened in December, but in this, very close to this new year, it was actually the event that really began all of the violence, as we saw in Kenya. And now the Chinese have blocked every media outlet that can't get into Tibet to find out what's going on there. They're killing hundreds, perhaps thousands. We'll never know. Will there be a ban on the Olympics? No. That's not what this was about. They'll talk about it. They'll threaten. But in the end, on the 8th month of the 8th year of the 8th day of the 8th hour of the 8th minute of the 8th second when it begins on August 8th, everyone will be in their place. Space, back with more in a moment.
today's headlines than anyone else dares to go. But can you take it? This is A View from Space with the Spaceman. AM 640, Toronto Radio.
On Space, it's A View from Space on AM 640, Toronto Radio. I've got a couple of spots you can email me, your comments, information you might have. Space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com is the other one. Tonight's show is a warning because I don't think the mass majority of people have yet fallen for the indoctrination that's being slowly but surely, gently forced on us all. I know you don't hear the words gently forced too often in a sentence, especially side by side, word after one another. But that is exactly what is happening. We're being indoctrinated slowly but surely, and it's gently forced on us, especially targeting our young people. Take, for instance, tonight here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, the country that racked up the most signatories online of any country for Earth Hour. The youth of Toronto were lured out to our city centre for a concert by Nelly Furtado. I guarantee most of the people that showed up there weren't showing up to support Earth Hour. They were there to gather together, to party, to hear free music by a fairly large name. This is nothing more than entrapment with music as the bait. A typical Illuminati deception. It's really the gathering together of our youth for the sole purpose of indoctrination into a religion. What religion? Well, it's called Gaia worship. Goddess worship. Gaia is the primal Greek goddess that personifies the earth. Primal, meaning one of the first deities. Gaia is a premortal and chthonic deity in the ancient Greek pantheon of gods and considered a mother goddess or great goddess. To the Romans, she was known as Terra. This is where the word terra firma comes from, which is Latin for solid ground. It's also the origin of the word terrestrial, the French word terre, solid ground. Earth has the same origin. Chthonic, from Greek meaning of the earth, from chthon, earth, pertaining to the earth. Earthy, it designates or pertains to deities or spirits of the underworld in the Greek religion. So that's why I say Gaia is premortal and chthonic, meaning one of the first of the pantheon of gods in Greek mythology, and also pertains to the spirits of the underworld in the Greek religion. So, it is a religion. Greek chthon is one of the several words for earth. It typically refers to the interior of the soil rather than the living surface of the land, as Gaia does, or the land as territory, as Korah does in Greek. It evokes at once abundance and the grave. While words like earth deity have kind of vague implications in English, the words chthoni and chthonios have a more precise and technical meaning in Greek, referring directly to the manner of what rituals were performed in the offering of sacrifices to each particular god or goddess. So you see how it really is, if it's about Gaia, it's about spirits of the underworld. Chthonic cults practice ritual sacrifice, which often happened at night time. And when was this Gaia goddess worshipped around the world on Earth hour? Nighttime. When the sacrifice was a living creature, the sacrifice was placed in a pit or sunken chamber. In some Greek chthonic cults, the animal or whatever was sacrificed on a raised altar. Offerings were usually burnt whole or just buried after the ritual sacrifice was performed. Chthonic gods and goddesses are also associated with fertility. The gods who came later, the Olympian deities, were also concerned for the earth's prosperity. Ah, yes. You see, this is one of the oldest known tricks to control man. Back in those ancient times, the people were manipulated, controlled by their leaders, as you and I are today. The same bloodlines as today's leaders. Back then it was, if you don't do this certain ritual to his particular god or goddess, you won't have sufficient rain to grow your food and you'll starve. Or you won't have children. Your wife will be barren unless you perform this ritual. Or that ritual to a particular goddess they've invented to manipulate you. Doesn't that sound exactly like what's being done today with climate change? If you don't cut greenhouse gas emissions, you'll all die within a few short years. Just like back then. Today it's all mumbo-jumbo, or an elaborate magic spell that was cast that effectively brainwashes the people into obedience. I mean, they didn't even keep their stories of what they perceive as the truth straight, because a lie is a lie is a lie. Once you tell one lie, you have to tell another one to cover up the last one you just told. For instance, in Greek mythology, ancient man had Demeter and Persephone both watching over aspects of the fertility of land, yet Demeter had a typically Olympian cult, while Persephone had a chthonic one. Even more confusingly, Demeter, the mother of Persephone, was worshipped alongside Persephone with identical rites, and yet occasionally was classified as an Olympian in later poetry and myth. The absorption of some earlier cults into the newer pantheon of gods versus those who resisted being absorbed provided the confusion. This is what I was talking about last week when I was talking about the Son of God and the Sun God, right at the same time of the vernal equinox, the resurrection of the sun, the resurrection of Jesus, the mixing together of Christianity and sun worship, the watering down. No, not the watering down. It's not a watering down at all. It's a total distortion and corruption of the truth. The objective being to eliminate the monotheistic religions, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, and meld all the other world's religions into one. Their Luciferian religion, with Satan as God. Much more coming up on View from Space on AM 640, Toronto Radio, on the Olympian and chthonic Greek gods and goddesses.
The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of AM 640 Toronto Radio. Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman. AM 640 Toronto Radio.
I'm the guy that calls space. It's View from Space on AM 640 Toronto Radio. I've been talking about Olympian and chthonic gods in Greek mythology. And that's exactly what Gaia was. Gaia, of course, the earth goddess that unwittingly everyone around the globe who had been celebrating or showing their support for Earth Hour were in fact worshiping Gaia. Nighttime. is when it's done. And the categories Olympian and chthonic aren't really hard and fast. Some Olympian gods, such as Hermes and Zeus, were also given chthonic sacrifices and tithes in certain locations. The deified hero Heracles and Asclepius might be worshipped as gods or chthonic heroes, depending on the site and the time of origin of the myth. What's more, a few deities aren't easily classifiable under these words, Olympian or chthonic either. You see, the chthonic god is a spirit connection. Hecate, for instance, was typically offered puppies at crossroads. That's what the ritual was for the worship of Hecate. Offered puppies at crossroads. Not an Olympian type of sacrifice, but not a typical offering to Persephone, nor the heroes like her either, because of her underworld rules. Hecate is generally classed as chthonic. Hecate was the goddess of the crossroads, the goddess of magic, the goddess of witchcraft, the goddess of the night. She was a moon goddess. Ghosts, necromancy, which is the conjuring up of demon spirits of the dead for purposes of magically revealing the future or influencing the course of events. Hecate was the only child of Titanus, Perseus, and Asteria, where we get the word hysteria from. If you'll recall, this sacrifice was played out on YouTube. This Hecate, puppies at the crossroads sacrifice, was carried out just a few weeks ago on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen it. But do you recall the video of a United States Marine in Iraq riding in what looked like a armored personnel carrier or a tank, who punched a puppy and threw it over the cliff? You recall that video? This was a PSYOPs story shown to the world via YouTube. See how powerful this video sharing site of the Illuminati is? That's what it's for. Casting these spells, disseminating their lies. What everyone really saw and participated in when they watched was a ritual sacrifice to Hecate. The reason for the sacrifice was because the Illuminati believed the war in Iraq is at a crossroads for the world. And puppies are the typical offering to Hecate at the crossroads. More on Hecate in a moment, which will fill up all of the blank areas about her in your mind. The PSYOP story shown to the world via YouTube was a ritual sacrifice to Hecate. Everyone was talking about it for about 2 or 3 days. How utterly horrible this United States Marine was, throwing that darling little puppy to its death. Crossroads in Iraq. Crossroads, you see, are very important because a cross is really an X marking the spot to be focused on. The X is the mark of Cain. In Brazilian mythology, related to the headless mule, the devil, the besta fera, and the Brazilian version of the werewolf, and religion as the favorite place for the manifestation of left-hand entities such as X's, and where to place offerings to the Horatius. The left-hand path, of course, is the dark side of black magic. And that's what we were selling with Earth Hour in the past while. On March 29th, as it moved across the globe, Earth hour followed the sun in the darkness, just behind the sun. Symbolically, the crossroads can be used as a metaphor for the afterlife. The crossroads is referred to as a turning point with an unpredictable outcome. Iraq. There now. In ancient literature, some scripts have references to other dimensional worlds with their own crossroads. In these writings, the crossroads have 4 different endings. There's a golden age. There's an ending of where nothing's changed. Another ending is an apocalypse. And another one is a bad event that varies with every different world. Crossroads was actually the name of the 2002 movie directed by Tamara Davis, which was Britney Spears' first major movie. It was called Crossroads. Britney played the teenage Lucy, the lead character. Lucy, of course, the feminine version of Lucifer. Then there's the legend of Robert Johnson. The crossroads are given immense power to conjure, root work, and hoodoo, a form of African-American magical spirituality. And in conjure practice, legend has it that in order to acquire body skills or various manual skills, such as playing a musical instrument or throwing dice or even dancing, you go to a crossroads at a certain number of times, either at midnight or just before dawn, but it has to be in the dark. And as legend has it, in voodoo, you'll meet a black man, whom some call the devil, who will give you the desired skills that you're asking for. This myth is retold and retold in blues songs like Sold It to the Devil by Black Spider Dumpling, whose real name was John Twitty. Robert Johnson, his legend, though, is the most famous soul selling at a crossroads. The song's called Crossroads Blues by Robert Johnson. The song is a description of a black man standing at a crossroads trying to hitch a ride. The fear coming from the singer's apprehension of finding himself being a young black man in the 1920s, deep south, alone after dark on a road at the mercy of passing motorists. Others believe Robert Johnson sang this song because of a deal that was made with Legba. Legba is interesting. But many believe Johnson sang the song because of a deal that he was involved with Legba, in which appear suddenly. Legba is the intermediary between Loa, spirits of voodoo, and permission to speak with those spirits. And it's believed to speak all human languages, Legba. And he decides whether you get to speak to Loa, the spirits of voodoo, who will be invoked with the correct ritual ceremony to do your bidding. He is always the first, Legba is, and always the last spirit invoked in a ritual ceremony, because his permission is needed for any communication between man and the spirit world. He opens and closes the doorway. Legba is a trickster deity and a god of entrances and crossroads. He's part of the belief system of blacks of Dutch Guinea, Brazil, Trinidad, and Haiti. One country today that still has voodoo as its national religion. Space back with more in a moment on AM 640 Toronto Radio. Just talking about Earth Hour and what's behind it.
extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman. AM 640, Toronto Radio.
I'm Space at AM 640, Toronto Radio. The show's called A View from Space. I've just been talking about black magic, voodoo, and the crossroads, which, of course, conjures up those stories of Robert Johnson and the man who sold his soul to the devil at the crossroads to be very proficient at playing a guitar. And it really goes a long way back. The idea of selling your soul for musical or other skills goes a long way back. Before the American South and Robert Johnson, a few virtuoso classical musicians like Paganini had stories told about selling their soul for music prowess. And that story goes back to medieval troubadours doing something similar to that. The selling of your soul for guitar power story has become an inextricably intertwined with rock and metal guitarists. The crossroads. There's a lot to it. Hecate, who was the Greek goddess of the crossroads, Greek goddess of the three paths, because you see, originally the first intersections was a road with just one road going up to it to form a T, which would be the first real crossroad, which actually be a T road. And they were three directions to go. There's left and right and back from where you came if you came on the side road. So there are three paths. That's why Hecate was the goddess of three paths. Guardian of the household, too, was she. Protector of everything newly born. The goddess of witchcraft. Once a widely revered and influential goddess. The reputation of Hecate's been tarnished over the centuries. Today she's usually depicted as a hag or the old witch stirring the cauldron. If you've seen pictures of an old witch with a big black mole on her nose and the witch's hat cackling and stirring a cauldron, that's Hecate. That was not the original image of Hecate, though, in her original glory. She was originally described as a beautiful and powerful goddess. The Greek goddess Hecate was the only one of the ancient titans who Zeus allowed to retain their authority once the Olympians seized control. Yes, Zeus shared with Hecate, and only Hecate, the awesome power of giving humanity anything she wished, or withholding it if she wanted to. Usually she's classified as a moon goddess. Her kingdoms were actually threefold, of course. Three, the number of royalty, the Trinity. It was the earth, the sea, and the sky. Those were her kingdoms. Having the power to create or withhold storms undoubtedly played a role in making her the goddess who was the protector of shepherds and sailors. I talked about this Greek deity Hecate in depth a couple of years ago. Almost 3 now, during the summer of 2005, which saw a record set for the most hurricanes in a single season, all of them man-made. And I laid it all out for you in that 2005 series of shows all summer long. There was one hurricane after the other, and I was here dutifully reporting it to you, what had happened, using the International Space Station as the control platform for the storms to be formed. In all, 36 records were broken during the 2005 hurricane season. 36 records! For instance, the most storms in a single season ever, all time, 28. Most hurricanes in a season, all time, most most Category 5 hurricanes all time in one year. First ever storms that were named in the Greek alphabet. Longest lived tropical storm. Longest lived December hurricane. 3 of the 6 strongest hurricanes on record in the Atlantic were recorded that year. Most money, the costliest ever hurricane season. 36 records. I could go on and on. Just to give you an idea of who Hecate was. Hecate was also a lover of solitude, like her cousin Artemis, a virgin goddess, unwilling to sacrifice her independent nature for the sake of marriage. She walked the roads at night or visited cemeteries during the dark phase of the moon. The goddess Hecate was described as shining or luminous. In other legends, she's invisible, only glimpsed at as a light, a will-o'-the-wisp. Some believe it was because her mother was Asteria, the Titan goddess of the shining light or star, and was why she always carried a torch on her journeys. Hecate always had a torch. Hecate, like Artemis, was usually depicted with her sacred dogs, although Hecate and even her animals were sometimes said to have 3 heads, and that they could see in all directions. She's usually depicted as a beautiful woman having 3 human heads, but there are other images of her that are outright grotesque. And there's one with a snake's head, one with a horse's, and a third a boar's head. This, of course, was to give you the impression that she is the embodiment of good and evil. The duality of Lucifer is mirrored here. The Illuminati belief here is that man is both good and evil, and you must maintain a balance of the amount of good and evil a person does in his lifetime to reincarnate. You reincarnate a total of 7 times. On the 7th time, it's 7th heaven. You become a god. The ability to see in several directions at once, even the past, like the present and the future, figured in her most famous myth, the abduction of Persephone, which of course is the Greek mythology story of how we got our seasons. It was the goddess Hecate who saw and told the frantic Demeter, Persephone's mother, what had happened to her daughter. Hecate continued to play an important role in the story of Persephone, too, becoming her confidant when she was in the underworld. Hecate, you see, was allowed in and out of the underworld at her leisure, because Hades, the lord of the dead and ruler of the underworld, honored Hecate as a prominent and permanent guest in the spirit world. This had the effect of enhancing her reputation as a spirit of black magic with the power to conjure up dreams, prophecies, phantoms. Space AM 640, Toronto Radio. Hecate's ability to see into the underworld, the other world of the sleeping and the dead, made her comfortable and tolerant in the company of those that she would shun out of fear or misunderstanding. In her role as Queen of the Night, sometimes traveling with a following of ghosts and other special outcasts, social outcasts, she was both honored and feared as the protectress of the oppressed and of those who lived on the edge. In Rome, a lot of the priests in her sacred groves were former slaves who had been released to work in her service. More on the goddess of the crossroads, because I'm getting to the real crossroads. Coming up. This is AM 640, Toronto Radio. I'm Space, back in a minute.